Hello, I'm Robert Martinez, State Historian of New Mexico, and this is New Mexico History in 10 Minutes. The year's 1535, and by this time, Spain has really consolidated her presence in what is now Mexico. Back then it was called Nueva España, New Spain. And by 1535, you have Spanish government, the viceroy. The first one was Antonio de Mendoza. And you also have the church presence. The first bishop of Mexico City was Fray Juan de Zumárraga. So you have this shift away from the era of the conquistador, where these powerful men were creating their own empires, really, wealth, power, and were considered a bit of a threat to the crown in Spain. Remember, the Spanish monarch was absolute monarchy. They had that divine right concept, the notion that God chose them to rule. And so any challenge to that was dealt with swiftly. Cristobal Colón, Christopher Columbus, was taken back to Spain in chains, arrested. When he got to be a little bit too arrogant, that happened to Hernán Cortés. He was also taken back to Spain in chains, arrested. The story goes that when he was in Spain, he was trying to reclaim his former glory, Hernán Cortés, and supposedly when the king, Carlos V, Charles V, was leaving his royal palace in his carriage, there was a huge crowd screaming, yelling, glorifying him, and this ragged man with tattered clothes, long, dirty hair, unkempt beard, approached angrily, as you can imagine, violently even, the coach, and his guards, the king's guards, kept him at bay, kept him away. Well, the king said, no, let him say what he has to say. And when he approached the king asked him, who are you, señor? Who are you? And Cortés supposedly responded, Your Majesty, I'm the man who gave you more kingdoms than your father left you towns. So that was the end of the reign of the conquistador. In 1535, we see the beginning of a thrust north by Spain to consolidate her territories into what is now North America. Remember, this is 1535. There is no United States of America. There is no British presence in North America. After the odyssey of Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca and his cohorts, there were other Spaniards with him, and African Moor named Estebanico is also the name he's known by. By this time, there's some real interest in the northern lands. There's stories of people, communities, maybe even cities. Remember, there's that legend from the 700s in Spain of 7 bishops leaving west to establish 7 cities of gold on an island, a magical island. And so this idea, while fantastical to us and probably the people at that time, once the Spaniards encountered Tenochtitlan, La Ciudad de Mexico, it becomes known as the City of Mexico, it doesn't seem that far-fetched. Oh, there are stories circulating of cities that have buildings made of gold, the roads are paved with gold, people wear gold jewelry, and even strange ideas about the people themselves with exaggerated physical members, if you get my drift, and strange cultures that were well beyond what they had ever seen in Spain or Africa or the Middle East. So by 1539, the idea is put forth to have an expedition north to just see what exactly is going on up there after the stories told by Cabeza de Vaca and his traveling companions. Interestingly enough, the leader of that expedition in 1539 was a priest Fray Marcos de Niza, Friar Mark of Nice. We believe he was French. He took with him Spanish soldiers, and he took Esteban with him, Estebanico. It's quite fascinating because they go north, and they make their way into what is now New Mexico. This is the first encounter, at least official encounter, between Spain and who we now call the Pueblo people, the Puebloan Native Americans. What happens is Fray Marcos, he sends Esteban about a day ahead, and he tells him, let me know what you see. Let me know what you find. If you find nothing, send back a tiny little wooden cross, and I'll know not to proceed forward. If you send a medium-sized cross, then I'll know that there's something to consider. There's hope. If you send a large cross, that means there's a lot of gold up there. There's people to convert. So this is what happens. 1539, Esteban, the Moor, the African, he encounters the people at Zuni Pueblo. Think about this. He's African. His soldiers are Spanish. The expedition is led by a French priest. There are Pueblo Native Americans. This is an international incident. The story goes that Esteban approached the Pueblo walking, dressed in his African clothing. Clearly, he looked very different from the Puebloan people. And let's be very clear, the first official representative of Spain to the Pueblos was an African. So African history in New Mexico starts in 1539. The story goes he walked slowly towards the Pueblo, and they didn't know what to think of him. They thought him perhaps a god. They sprinkled cornmeal in his path as he walked slowly. For the Puebloan people, corn was and is a very sacred element, not just to consume and eat, but to bless. So he walked and was welcomed. They didn't know what to do about Esteban. They housed him, gave him food and drink, and they wondered, is he a god? Is he all-powerful, or at least very powerful, more powerful than us? They figured out rather quickly when they saw how he consumed food and drink and women like a man, that he was just that, a man. Poor Esteban, he was promptly killed. At least that's the story. There are other theories about that, but it looks like he was killed and even cut up into pieces, pieces of him sent to other Pueblo communities so that they could all see that these were not gods, these were men. Well, how about Fray Marcos de Niza? The story goes that he approached the Pueblo and saw a city of gold. We don't know exactly what he saw. We don't know if he thought he saw gold. I mean, we know that New Mexico has beautiful landscapes and amazing sunsets, and sometimes at the right time of day, at the right time at the end of the day when the sun hits the rocks and the mud dwellings, we know that it has a golden hue to it. Whatever happened, he said there are cities of gold there. There's gold in them, there are hills. And instead of going into the Pueblo, he and his soldiers went south. They turned around and went south, and they reported. There are people up there, and there are cities of gold, or at least towns of gold. Let's be clear about something. These were not adobe dwellings. These were puddled mud, caked mud dwellings made out of earth and stone. Adobe is not a Native American structure material. That's brought from Spain from North Africa and then to the Americas, including New Mexico, a little while later. So this is the beginning of official Spanish presence in New Mexico. These reports will lead to the much more significant and amazing expedition of Francisco Vázquez de Coronado in 1540.